Welcome to You Already Have It. Let me help you find it. A 21-day journey. Back to Yourself. Written and narrated by Dimple Mulchandani. This audiobook is intended for personal growth, reflection, inspiration, and educational purposes. Find a comfortable place, take a deep breath, and begin whenever you are ready. You already have it. Let me help you find it. The core philosophy. Most people spend their lives searching for peace, searching for answers, searching for confidence, searching for love, searching for purpose. They believe what they seek exists somewhere outside themselves, in another achievement, another relationship, another book, another goal. But what if the greatest discovery is not finding something new? What if it is remembering something old? The truth is, you already have the wisdom. You already have the strength. You already have the courage. You already have the peace. You already have the answers. They have simply been buried beneath noise, fear, doubt, expectations, and years of forgetting. This journey is not about becoming someone else. It is about returning to yourself, again and again, until one day you recognize the person you've been searching for and realize it was always you. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. When was the last time you stopped? Not because you were forced to. Not because you were exhausted, not because life pushed you to your limit, but because you chose to. Most people spend their lives moving from one responsibility to the next, from one goal to another. Always thinking about what comes next, rarely appreciating where they are. And somewhere along the way, they forget themselves. Maybe you felt that too. Maybe you've become so busy managing life that you've forgotten what it feels like to simply be alive inside it. No fixing, no planning, no proving, no performing, just being. For the next few moments, I invite you to set everything down. Not forever, just for now. The problems can wait. The unanswered questions can wait. Tomorrow can wait. Because this moment is asking for your attention. Right here, right now. Notice the space around you. Notice the chair beneath you. Notice the air against your skin. Notice that despite everything you may be carrying, you are still here. And there is something powerful about that. You have survived every difficult day that brought you to this moment, every challenge, every disappointment, every setback, every uncertainty. You are still here. Take a moment to acknowledge that. Not with pride, not with judgment, just with honesty. You are here. And for today, that is enough. More than enough. As this journey continues, remember this simple truth. You do not have to have all the answers. You do not have to know exactly where you're going. You do not have to become someone else before you deserve peace. Peace is not waiting at the end of the journey. It begins the moment you pause long enough to notice it. And perhaps that moment is now. Before we continue, I want you to consider something. You have spent years listening to other people, listening to expectations, listening to opinions, listening to advice, listening to who you should be, who you should become, how you should live. And somewhere in all that noise, a quieter voice may have been forgotten. Your own. Not the voice of fear, not the voice of doubt, not the voice that compares. The deeper voice. The honest voice. The one that speaks softly and waits patiently to be heard. It rarely shouts. It does not compete for attention. It simply waits, waiting for a moment of stillness, waiting for a moment when the noise settles, waiting for you to remember it is there. Perhaps you've felt it before, a feeling that something is right, or a feeling that something isn't, a gentle knowing, a quiet truth, a whisper that arrives before logic has a chance to explain it. That voice has guided you more times than you realize. And today, I want you to begin trusting it again. Not perfectly, not all at once, just a little more than yesterday. For the next few moments, stop searching for answers outside yourself. Instead, become curious. What have you been trying to tell yourself? What truth have you been avoiding? What dream have you been postponing? What part of you has been asking for attention? You do not need to solve it today. You do not need to figure everything out. You only need to listen. Because beneath the noise, beneath the pressure, beneath the expectations, there is still a voice that knows. And the more often you listen, the clearer it becomes. Perhaps that voice brought you here, and perhaps it already knows the next step. Have you noticed how fast everything has become? Fast messages, fast decisions, fast meals, fast answers, fast lives. Everyone seems to be rushing somewhere. And yet, very few people stop long enough to ask where they are actually going. Maybe you felt it too. The pressure to keep moving. The pressure to stay productive. The pressure to always be doing something. As though slowing down means falling behind. As though resting means losing ground. As though your worth is somehow connected to how busy you are. But what if that isn't true? What if the life you're trying so hard to reach is quietly passing by while you're rushing toward it? Think about that for a moment. How many beautiful moments have gone unnoticed because your mind was already focused on the next thing? How many conversations? How many sunsets? How many opportunities to simply enjoy being alive? The world will always ask you to move faster. There will always be another task, another goal, another reason to hurry. But peace lives at a different speed. Peace does not rush. Peace does not compete. Peace does not demand. It waits, patiently, for you to arrive. Not next week, not next year, now, in this moment, right where you are. You do not need to earn this moment. You do not need permission to enjoy it. You do not need to complete everything on your list before you allow yourself to breathe. You are allowed to slow down. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to notice your life while you are living it. Because one day, you may discover that the moments you were rushing through were the moments that mattered most. So today, slow down, not because you have nowhere to go, but because some things can only be found when you stop hurrying past them. There is something you have been carrying for far too long. Perhaps it is a disappointment. Perhaps it is a regret. Perhaps it is a conversation that never happened, or one that never ended. Maybe it is a version of your life you thought would look different by now. A dream that didn't unfold the way you imagined. A relationship, a mistake, a memory, a story. Whatever it is, you have carried it faithfully, day after day, year after year. And maybe no one has ever told you this. You do not have to keep carrying it. Not everything that belongs to your past deserves a place in your future. I know that can be difficult to hear, because sometimes we become so familiar with our burdens that we mistake them for part of who we are. But they are not who you are. They are experiences. They are chapters. They are moments. They are not your identity. For a moment, imagine what your life would feel like if you stopped arguing with what has already happened, not approving of it, not liking it, not pretending it was fair, simply releasing the struggle against it. Because the past has already taken enough from you. It does not need your peace as well. You deserve that peace. You deserve the freedom that comes from no longer carrying every old wound into every new day. And perhaps letting go is not losing something important. Perhaps it is making space for something better, something lighter, something truer. Something that has been waiting patiently for you to put the weight down. Not tomorrow, not someday, today, even if only for a moment. And that moment may be enough to begin. I want to tell you something that may be difficult to believe right now. You have survived every uncertain season of your life, every one of them. Think about that. There were moments when you were convinced things would never get better. Moments when you didn't know what to do. Moments when the future felt unclear. Moments when fear seemed louder than hope. And yet, here you are. Still standing. Still growing. Still becoming. Life has asked a lot of you, more than most people realize. There were battles no one saw. Questions no one answered. Tears no one noticed. And somehow, you found a way through. Not because you had all the answers. Not because you were fearless. But because something within you kept moving forward. Even when you doubted yourself. Even when you wanted to give up. Even when you couldn't see the path ahead. That part of you still exists. Right now. As you listen to these words, it has never left. The mind often asks for certainty. It wants guarantees. It wants proof. It wants to know exactly how everything will unfold. But life rarely works that way. Sometimes the next step appears only after we take the one in front of us. Trust does not mean knowing. Trust means moving forward without knowing everything. Trust means believing that today's confusion does not define tomorrow's possibilities. Trust means understanding that not every chapter makes sense while you are living it. Some chapters reveal their purpose later, much later. So if there is something in your life today that feels uncertain, I invite you to soften your grip, not because it doesn't matter, but because constant worry has never changed an outcome. You do not need to force every answer. You do not need to control every detail. You do not need to carry tomorrow before it arrives. For now, trust yourself. Trust your journey. Trust the strength that has carried you this far, because it is still carrying you. And perhaps it always will. There is a quiet kind of suffering that many people carry, not because life is difficult, but because they spend so much energy wishing reality were different, wishing the past had changed, wishing people had behaved differently, wishing circumstances had been fair, wishing life had followed the plan. Perhaps you know that feeling. Most of us do. We replay conversations. We revisit decisions. We imagine different outcomes. And without realizing it, we begin arguing with reality itself. But reality never argues back. It simply remains what it is. For a moment, consider how much energy you have spent fighting things that have already happened, things that cannot be changed, things that belong to yesterday. Now imagine what would happen if you use that same energy to support the person you are today. Acceptance is often misunderstood. People think acceptance means giving up, settling, approving, agreeing, but it means none of those things. Acceptance simply means seeing clearly, seeing what is, without adding resistance, without adding struggle, without carrying the extra weight created by wishing reality were something else. Because the truth is, you cannot heal what you refuse to acknowledge. You cannot move forward while insisting you should still be somewhere else. And you cannot find peace while constantly arguing with the present moment. Today, I invite you to release that argument. Just for now. Let reality be what it is. Let the past be what it was. Let this moment be exactly as it is. Not because everything is perfect, but because this moment is where your power lives. Not yesterday, not tomorrow. Here, and perhaps acceptance is not the end of hope. Perhaps it is the beginning of freedom. There is someone you may have been unfair to for a very long time. Someone you have judged more harshly than anyone else. Someone whose mistakes you remember, whose failures you replay, whose regrets you quietly carry. That person is you. Perhaps there is something you still hold against yourself. A decision, a mistake, a missed opportunity, a version of yourself you wish had known better. And every time you remember it, you feel the weight of it all over again. As though the past deserves another punishment. As though guilt can somehow change what has already happened. But let me ask you something. How many years must a person serve for a mistake they can no longer undo? How many times must a lesson be learned before the punishment ends? Because perhaps you have already paid enough. Perhaps you have carried the regret, learned the lesson, grown through the experience, and yet you continue holding yourself captive, not because you deserve it, but because you have forgotten that growth was always the purpose, not punishment. Growth. The person who made that mistake is not the person listening to these words right now. That person existed in a different moment, with different knowledge, different fears, different understanding, and perhaps they did the best they could with what they knew, just as you are doing now. For a moment, imagine offering yourself the same compassion. You would offer someone you love the same patience, the same understanding, the same grace. Because healing does not happen when we keep reopening old wounds. Healing happens when we finally allow them to close. You are not your worst decision. You are not your greatest regret. You are not the mistake. You are the person who survived it, learned from it, and became someone wiser because of it. So today, I invite you to release one burden. Not because the past did not matter, but because your future matters too. And perhaps the person who deserves your forgiveness most has been waiting for it all along. When did rest become something we have to earn? Somewhere along the way, many of us learned a dangerous lesson. That our value comes from what we produce, what we achieve, what we accomplish, how much we can carry, how much we can endure. And so, we keep going. Even when we're tired, even when we're overwhelmed, even when something inside us is quietly asking for a pause. Because resting feels uncomfortable, almost guilty, as though stopping means falling behind, as though slowing down means we are somehow less worthy. But what if that isn't true? What if rest is not the reward for a life well lived? What if rest is part of the life itself? Think about nature for a moment. The seasons rest. The ocean rests. The sun disappears each evening. Even the earth itself moves through cycles of activity and renewal. Nothing in nature is expected to bloom every day. So why do we expect it from ourselves? Why do we demand constant growth, constant progress, constant effort? You were never meant to live that way. You were meant to breathe, to recover, to restore, to begin again. And there is wisdom in that. Because exhaustion rarely produces clarity. Exhaustion rarely produces peace. Exhaustion rarely produces your best self. Sometimes, the most productive thing you can do is rest. Not because you are weak, not because you are giving up, but because your mind, your heart, and your spirit deserve care too. You do not have to justify your need for rest. You do not have to prove that you are tired enough. You do not need permission. You are human. And being human means needing moments of stillness, moments of recovery, moments of simply being. So today, release the guilt, release the pressure, release the belief that your worth is measured by your productivity, because you are valuable, even when you are resting, and perhaps the version of you that you have been working so hard to become is waiting for you on the other side of a little more kindness toward yourself. Before we begin today, I want you to consider a possibility. What if you have spent years chasing something that was never missing? What if the feeling of not enough was never the truth, only a story repeated so often that it began to sound like your own voice? Perhaps you've heard it before. The voice that says, you should be further ahead. You should be doing more. You should have figured it out by now. You should be better, stronger, smarter, more successful, more confident, more everything. And no matter how much you accomplish, the finish line keeps moving. Because the problem was never your progress. The problem was the belief that your worth must be earned, that you become valuable only after you achieve something, only after you prove something, only after you become someone else. But think about this. When a child takes their first breath, have they earned their worth? When a flower begins to bloom, has it earned the right to exist? When the sun rises each morning, does it need permission to shine? Of course not. Their value is not something they achieve. It is something they already possess. And perhaps the same has always been true for you. You were never meant to spend your life proving your worth. You were meant to recognize it, to remember it, to live from it. Not someday. Not after one more accomplishment. Now. Exactly as you are. This does not mean you stop growing. It means you stop believing growth is what makes you worthy. Because growth is something you do. Worthiness is something you are. There is a difference. A profound difference. So today, I invite you to set down a burden. The burden of trying to earn what has already been yours. The burden of proving what never needed proof. The burden of becoming enough. Because perhaps the person you have been trying so hard to become has been enough all along. What if the life ahead of you is bigger than the life behind you? I want you to sit with that question for a moment. Because many people unknowingly live inside old limitations, old stories, old fears, old expectations. Not because they want to, but because those stories have become familiar. And familiarity can be powerful, even when it no longer serves us. Perhaps someone once told you what was possible for you. And perhaps, without realizing it, You accepted their version of your future. Perhaps life disappointed you. Perhaps circumstances made you cautious. Perhaps fear convinced you to shrink your dreams, so they would hurt less if they never happened. But what if possibility still exists? Not in some distant future. Not in someone else's life. In yours. Right here. Right now. Because possibility is not something we find. It is something we allow. The moment we stop assuming, the future must look exactly like the past. The moment we stop treating old experiences as permanent predictions. The moment we remember that life can surprise us. Think about your own journey. How many moments arrived that you never planned? How many blessings appeared that you never expected? How many challenges helped shape strengths you didn't know you possessed? Life has always been unfolding in ways you could not fully predict. Why would the future be any different? Perhaps there are opportunities already moving toward you. People you have not yet met. Experiences you have not yet imagined. Doors you cannot yet see. Not because of magic, but because life is still unfolding. Your story is still being written. And the next chapter does not need permission from the previous one. So today, I invite you to loosen your grip on limitation. To become curious again. To become open again. To become willing again. Because possibility often arrives quietly. It rarely announces itself. It simply waits for someone brave enough to believe there may be more available to them than they once thought. And perhaps that someone is you. Have you ever noticed that life is constantly asking you to become not someone else, not someone better, simply more of who you already are? For most of our lives, we are taught to look outward, to compare, to compete, to measure ourselves against people whose journey was never meant to be ours. And in that comparison, it becomes easy to forget something important. You were never meant to become a copy. You were never meant to become an imitation. You were never meant to become a smaller version of someone else's dream. You were meant to become yourself, fully, honestly, courageously. And perhaps that sounds simple, but it may be one of the hardest things we ever do. Because becoming yourself requires letting go of who you thought you had to be. The people pleaser, the perfectionist, the one who carries everyone else's expectations. The version of you that keeps shrinking so others can remain comfortable. You were not born to live that way. You were born to express what is uniquely yours. Your voice, your gifts, your perspective, your light. Not because you are better than anyone else, but because there has never been another you, and there never will be. The world does not need another copy. It needs the original, the person beneath the fear, the person beneath the doubt, the person beneath the stories that say you should be someone else. And perhaps that person has been quietly waiting for your permission, waiting for your trust, waiting for your courage, not to become more, but to become true. So today, release the comparison, release the pressure, release the impossible task of becoming someone you were never meant to be. Because your greatest work may not be creating a new version of yourself. It may be remembering the one who has been there all along, and perhaps the person you are becoming is simply the person you were always meant to be. Every day, whether you realize it or not, you are choosing, not only with your actions, but with your attention, your beliefs, your thoughts, your expectations, your focus. And over time, those choices quietly become your life. Most people imagine that life changes in dramatic moments. A breakthrough, a decision, a turning point. And sometimes it does. But more often, life changes through smaller choices. The choice to keep going. The choice to believe again. The choice to try once more. The choice to see possibility where fear once lived. The choice to speak kindly to yourself. The choice to stop telling the same painful story. The choice to begin again. One choice. One moment. One day at a time. Perhaps that is why change feels so difficult. Because we are often waiting for motivation. When what we truly need is a decision. A decision to move in a new direction. A decision to stop giving power to what keeps us stuck. A decision to become an active participant in our own lives. Not because every choice will be perfect, it won't. Not because every path will be clear, it won't. But because every meaningful life is built one choice at a time. Think about that. The person you become tomorrow is being shaped by what you choose today. Not all at once. Quietly, patiently, moment by moment, choice by choice. And the beautiful thing is this. No matter what happened yesterday, today still offers you a choice. No matter how many times you've fallen, today still offers you a choice. No matter how long you've felt lost, today still offers you a choice. That opportunity never completely disappears. It arrives again each morning, waiting, patiently, for you to notice it. So today, choose hope, choose possibility, choose self-respect, choose peace, choose the next step, not because it is easy, but because your future deserves your participation. And perhaps the life you are hoping to create begins with a choice you make today. Many people believe courage looks powerful, confident, fearless, certain. But real courage rarely looks that way. Real courage often looks much quieter. It looks like showing up when you feel uncertain, speaking when your voice trembles, trying again after disappointment, beginning before you feel ready, and continuing. Even when you do not know how the story ends, perhaps there is something in your life right now that requires courage, a conversation, a decision, a dream, a change, a step you know you need to take. And perhaps fear has been whispering reasons to wait. Wait until you are more confident. Wait until you have more certainty. Wait until you know exactly how everything will unfold. But what if courage does not come after the step? What if courage appears because of the step? Think about every meaningful moment in your life, every risk, every opportunity, every turning point. There was probably uncertainty. There was probably fear. There was probably a reason not to move forward. And yet, something within you moved anyway. Not because you were fearless, but because something mattered more than the fear. That strength still lives within you. Right now, as you listen to these words, it has not disappeared. It may simply be waiting for your trust. Fear is not always a sign to stop. Sometimes fear is simply a sign that you are standing at the edge of growth, at the edge of possibility, at the edge of becoming more of who you are. So today, do not ask yourself if you are fearless. Ask yourself if you are willing. Willing to take the next step. Willing to trust yourself. Willing to move forward without every answer. Because courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something else matters more. And perhaps the life you are waiting for is waiting for a courageous version of you to say yes. There is a quiet magic that most people overlook, not because it is hidden, but because it is familiar, and familiarity has a way of becoming invisible. Think about your life for a moment. The people who care about you, the breath moving through your body, the ability to begin again, the lessons you have learned, the strength you have gained, the moments that shaped you, the opportunities still ahead of you. None of these are guaranteed, and yet, they are so often taken for granted, not intentionally, simply because they are already here. The mind has a fascinating habit. It focuses on what is missing, what is unfinished, what has not happened yet, what still needs to be fixed. And while there is nothing wrong with growth, there is something powerful about remembering what is already present. Because gratitude does not ignore reality, it expands it. It reminds us that our lives are often richer than our worries allow us to see. Perhaps there are challenges in your life right now. Perhaps there are unanswered questions. Perhaps there are things you deeply wish were different. And still, there are things worthy of appreciation, things worthy of acknowledgement, things worthy of gratitude. The two can exist together. You do not need a perfect life to feel grateful. You do not need every answer. You do not need every dream to arrive first. Gratitude begins where you are, not where you hope to be. And the beautiful thing about gratitude is this: whatever you consistently notice begins to grow in your awareness. The more beauty you notice, the more beauty you find. The more kindness you notice, the more kindness appears. The more reasons you discover to appreciate life, the more life reveals to appreciate. Not because the world changed, but because your attention did. So today, pause for a moment. Notice something good, something simple, something real, and allow yourself to appreciate it fully. Because perhaps the life you have been waiting to feel grateful for has already begun. Have you ever noticed that where your attention goes, your energy often follows? Think about it. When you focus on problems, you begin seeing more problems. When you focus on limitations, you begin noticing more limitations. When you focus on fear, fear begins to feel larger. Not because the world changed, but because your attention changed. And attention is powerful. Far more powerful than most people realize. Because attention shapes perception. Perception shapes decisions. And decisions quietly shape our lives. This is why intention matters. Not because intention magically controls the future, but because intention influences how you meet it. Imagine beginning each day with a simple question. Who do I want to be today? Not what do I need to achieve? Not what do I need to prove? Who do I want to be? Calm, present, kind, courageous, focused, patient, grateful? The answer to that question begins influencing every choice that follows, every conversation, every reaction, every decision, every opportunity. Because intention acts like a compass. It may not control the weather, but it helps guide the direction. Without intention, it is easy to drift, easy to react, easy to let circumstances decide who we become. But with intention, something changes. We begin living with greater awareness, greater purpose, greater alignment. And over time, small intentional choices create remarkable outcomes. One day at a time, one moment at a time, one decision at a time. So today, before you move through the rest of your day, pause for a moment. Ask yourself one simple question. Who do I want to be today? And listen carefully to the answer, because perhaps the future you hope to create begins with the intention you choose to carry today. For most of your life, you have probably been taught how to earn, how to achieve, how to prove, how to work harder, how to push through, how to give. And perhaps those lessons have served you well. But there is another lesson that many people never learn. The lesson of receiving. Receiving support. Receiving kindness. Receiving love. Receiving opportunities. Receiving abundance. Receiving help. Receiving the good that life is trying to offer. For some reason, many of us find that difficult. We feel more comfortable giving than receiving, more comfortable helping than being helped, more comfortable carrying everything ourselves. And so, when life offers us something beautiful, we hesitate, we question it, we wonder if we deserve it, we wonder if we have earned it, we wonder if it will last. And sometimes, without realizing it, we push away the very things we have been asking for, not because we do not want them, but because we have forgotten how to receive them. Think about that. How often have you asked for peace while holding tightly to worry? How often have you asked for love while doubting your worthiness? How often have you asked for opportunity while expecting disappointment? Receiving requires openness. Receiving requires trust. Receiving requires a willingness to believe that something good can arrive. Not because life is always easy, not because every wish comes true, but because possibility deserves a place in your heart too. You do not need to force every blessing. You do not need to chase every answer. Some things arrive when we stop resisting them. Some things arrive when we make space. Some things arrive when we finally believe we are allowed to receive them. So today, if life offers you kindness, receive it. If life offers you support, receive it. If life offers you a reason to smile, receive it. Because perhaps the abundance you have been seeking has been standing at the door for some time, waiting patiently for you to let it in. Have you ever noticed that some things feel heavy, even when they look right on paper? The job, the goal, the relationship, the path. From the outside, everything may appear perfectly reasonable, and yet, something inside you feels unsettled. Not because you are ungrateful, not because you are difficult, but because there is a difference between what looks right and what feels true. That difference matters more than most people realize, because life becomes exhausting when we spend too much time living against ourselves, trying to force what does not fit, trying to become what does not resonate, trying to follow paths that belong to someone else. And over time, that disconnect creates a quiet kind of emptiness, a feeling that something is missing, even when everything appears fine. Perhaps you have experienced that feeling. Perhaps something in your life has been asking for your attention. A dream, a truth, a desire, a calling, not demanding, simply whispering, waiting for you to notice. Alignment is not about perfection. It is not about having every answer. It is not about creating a flawless life. Alignment is about honesty. The honesty to admit what feels true. The honesty to admit what no longer does. The honesty to stop pretending. Because every time you choose what is true for you, something begins to relax within you. The struggle softens. The noise quiets. The resistance fades. and life begins to feel less like a battle and more like a conversation. So, today, I invite you to ask yourself a simple question. What feels true? Not practical, not popular, not expected. True. And listen carefully, because beneath all the noise, your heart has been answering that question for a very long time. And perhaps the peace you have been searching for is not waiting at the end of a perfect path. Perhaps it is waiting where truth and courage finally meet. For a moment, imagine two people standing in the same place, looking at the same world, living through the same day, and yet seeing completely different realities. One sees limitations, the other sees possibilities. One sees what is missing, the other sees what is available. One sees scarcity, the other sees abundance. The circumstances may be similar, but their experience of life is not. Because abundance is not only about what you have, it is about how you see. Many people spend their lives waiting for more money, more time, more opportunity, more certainty, believing that abundance will arrive someday, later, after something changes, after something improves, after life finally becomes easier. But abundance often begins much earlier than that. It begins the moment we recognize that life has already given us more than we sometimes notice. The ability to learn, the ability to grow, the ability to choose, the ability to love, the ability to begin again. These are forms of abundance too. The problem is not that abundance is absent. The problem is that scarcity is loud. Scarcity constantly points toward what is missing, what is lacking, what is not enough. And if we listen long enough, we begin believing its story. But scarcity is not the only story available. There is another story, a quieter story, a wiser story, a story that reminds us that possibility still exists, that opportunities still exist, that growth still exists, that life still contains gifts waiting to be discovered. And the more we notice them, the more visible they become. Not because the world suddenly changed, but because our awareness did. So today, instead of asking what is missing, ask yourself something different. What is already here? What strengths already exist within me? What opportunities already surround me? What blessings have I overlooked? Because perhaps abundance is not something you create. Perhaps it is something you recognize. And perhaps the life you have been hoping for has been growing quietly around you all along. There are moments in life when you cannot see the entire path ahead. Moments when the answers are unclear. Moments when certainty feels impossible. And in those moments, something remarkable is required. Faith, not blind faith, not wishful thinking, a quieter kind of faith. The faith that says, I do not know exactly how this will unfold, but I am willing to keep moving forward. Think about your life. Some of the most important chapters began before you understood where they would lead. A conversation, a decision, a risk, a chance encounter, a single step. At the time, you could not see the full picture. And yet, those moments changed everything. Life often works that way. We are shown enough for the next step, rarely enough for the entire journey. And perhaps that is intentional, because if we knew every challenge, every lesson, every unexpected turn, we might never begin. Faith is what allows movement before certainty arrives. Faith is what allows hope before evidence appears. Faith is what allows possibility before proof exists. Not because proof is unimportant, but because life asks us to participate before everything becomes clear. Perhaps there is something in your life today that requires faith, a dream, a goal, a healing process, a new beginning, a future you cannot yet fully see. If so, remember this: you do not need to see the entire staircase to take the next step. You do not need every answer to move forward. You do not need certainty to begin. You only need enough faith for the step directly in front of you. And often, that is more than enough. Because perhaps the path you are looking for reveals itself only after you begin walking it. And perhaps the next step is already waiting for you. For so much of life, we believe we are searching for answers, searching for peace, searching for confidence, searching for purpose, searching for happiness, searching for something that will finally make us feel complete, and perhaps that search has brought you here. But what if the journey was never about finding something new? What if it was about remembering something old? Think about everything we have explored together. The pause, the listening, the slowing down, the letting go, the trust, the acceptance, the forgiveness, the rest, the courage, the possibility. None of these things were given to you. They were already within you, waiting, patiently, for your attention, for your awareness, for your willingness to remember. Perhaps that is what growth truly is. Not becoming someone else, not transforming into a different person, but returning to your wisdom, returning to your truth, returning to your strength, returning to your peace, returning to yourself. Because beneath every fear, every doubt, every story, there has always been something unchanged, something steady, something quietly waiting. The part of you that knows, the part of you that remembers, the part of you that has survived every challenge that brought you here. That part of you is still here, right now. As you listen to these words, it has never left. And it never will. Life may continue to change. Circumstances may continue to change. People may come and go. Chapters may begin and end. But that deeper part of you remains, always, waiting for your return. So today, stop searching for a moment. Stop striving. Stop chasing. Simply return. Return to this moment. Return to your breath. Return to your heart. Return to yourself. Because perhaps the person you have been searching for all this time has been walking beside you all along, quietly waiting for you to recognize them. Before we part, there is one final truth I would like to leave with you. Not a lesson, not a technique, not a strategy, a reminder. When this journey began, you may have believed you were searching for peace, searching for confidence, searching for answers, searching for purpose, searching for something that would finally change everything. And perhaps part of you expected to find it somewhere outside yourself, in the next achievement, the next breakthrough, the next chapter, the next version of who you hope to become. But look at where this journey has led. Again and again, you were invited inward, toward your own wisdom, your own courage, your own strength, your own truth. Not because someone gave those things to you, but because they were already there, waiting, quietly, patiently. The peace you were seeking, the courage you were seeking, the clarity you were seeking, the worthiness you were seeking, the love you were seeking, the abundance you were seeking, the answers you were seeking. They were never as far away as they seemed. Because the most important discoveries are often not discoveries at all. They are recognitions, moments of remembering, moments when something deep inside quietly says, I knew this. I had forgotten, but I knew. And perhaps that is what has happened here. Perhaps nothing new was added to you. Perhaps nothing was missing. Perhaps you simply remembered. Remembered the strength that carried you through difficult seasons. Remembered the wisdom beneath the noise. Remembered the truth beneath the fear. Remembered the light beneath the doubt. Remembered yourself. And if there is one thing I hope you carry forward, let it be this. Whenever life feels uncertain, whenever fear feels loud, whenever you begin searching once again, pause, take a breath, and remember, the peace is still there, the courage is still there, the wisdom is still there, the strength is still there, the answers are still there, waiting, as they always have been, because perhaps the greatest discovery of your life will not be finding something new. Perhaps it will be realizing that you already have it, and perhaps you always did. Thank you for listening. If this journey touched your heart, please follow, share, and revisit these chapters whenever you need them. Remember, you already have it.